Welcome to yet another episode of Formula One Philosophy with Sean and I, Nicholas McKiley. Episode 11, Formula One underscore philosophy at Instagram, Formula One Philosophy at YouTube. Sean and I have a lot to talk about today because we're going to talk about the Chinese Grand Prix recap. But first, we have someone who wants to talk for the first time ever. He's finally taking his job seriously. Ladies and gentlemen, producer Gatsby. Gatsby, would you like to introduce yourself?
Gentlemen and ladies of F1 philosophy, good day to you all. It is with great pleasure that I, producer Gatsby, stand before you today. You may not see me in the spotlight like the drivers on the track, but rest assured, my passion for F1 and audio craftsmanship is second to none. Behind these mixing boards and sound waves, I strive to capture the essence of our discussions, the thrill of the sport, and the very heartbeat of Formula One. Just a comment on the feud between myself and Nicholas. While our disagreements may fuel fiery discussions behind the scenes, they undoubtedly contribute to the dynamic and engaging nature of our show. After all, what would Formula One be without a bit of rivalry and adrenaline-pumping competition? So let's rev up those engines, embrace the conflict, and steer this podcast to new heights of entertainment and enlightenment.
Wow. Gatsby, I meant like just a small blurb of an introduction, not like a whole like quasi-rant.
You never knew he had so much to say, eh?
Yeah, well, I tried to keep him off the mic for this reason, but hey, that was pretty good, Gatsby. Just a...
Oh, fuck off.
Okay.
Oh, fuck off.
I'm your boss, but that's fine. Okay, I guess you can have that type
Fuck
of...
you.
God damn it. Bad start, Gatsby. Bad fucking start. After doing so good the last couple of weeks. Your passion for the sport? Gatsby, I saw you licking yourself 2 seconds ago. Literally 2 seconds ago, Gatsby. We do bring out great conversation out of each other, though. I'll give you that. All right. Are you going to do your job, though, this week?
Oh, fuck off.
Okay, well, that answers that.
Oh, fuck off.
Yeah. All right, I guess not. But anyways, let's get started. How was your week, Sean?
The week was all right. Nothing too entertaining happened, but yeah, we had a race.
Yeah, we did. It was a really good race too. I just have to say I have no crazy stories from the restaurant this week. But yeah, nobody took a peek at my junk this week either. So that title didn't seem to go over well with everybody. So yeah, noted Formula One philosophy crew, or whatever we call our fan base. The whole 5 of them? 6?
Yeah, that's a good question. What do we call our fan base?
The pit crew?
Seems a little on the nose, doesn't it?
Pit crew it is.
All right.
What an excellent race we saw in China. I just want to get off with that. Like, I really love that race. I don't know what you think. I'll let you interject whenever you want. But
It was a good race compared to some of the ones we've had. I wouldn't say it was amazing, but
I just think the track brought the best out of everybody. Like, once again, like Japan, a lot of different strategies that ended up coalescing into one after the safety car.
Car Z.
Yes, we're going to get into that. The back-to-back safety cars. Just when you thought you had enough with one, and that first one, they went on way too long. Mm-hmm. And then the second one, also way too long. Just to clear, it wasn't even like that much debris, and Valtteri Bottas's car was already next to the barriers.
Well, they couldn't get it to move.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, it was stalled.
Yeah, which I don't think was an engine problem, but we'll get into that.
No, we're going to get into a lot of things involving Sauber today. Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think so far it's the best race of the year. I think we're coming into a stretch of great races, though potentially Miami might bring out some drama. And then after that, I think it's Imola and then Monaco, which all could be very interesting based on the way the season's going.
Well, unless it rains, Monaco's going to be boring.
Probably will. Like, it's what, a month from now? Probably still in that springtime. Yeah. We'll see. Anyways, what did you think of the track and all the bullshit that went on there?
I mean, I think it was interesting. I think that's probably what made the race what it was. the track wasn't resurfaced, but everybody kind of freaked the fuck out when they showed up because they had, quote unquote, painted the track. All the Europeans lost their mind because apparently this isn't a popular thing to do in Europe. It's pretty popular here in North America, and evidently popular in China as well, to apply like a top sealer coat to asphalt. Right, we see it on driveways here. It's very popular in certain areas of the U.S. as well. It's a common thing to do. In theory, it should give it more grip overall. But what we saw was that it was kind of unpredictable, and it did seem like they didn't have a lot of grip all weekend.
Their complaint was it got rid of the natural racing line, right? And they basically had to refine and regroove that racing line. Was that their main complaint, or was it something else you think underlying?
What I heard was they weren't sure how it was going to behave. They weren't sure if it would start to come away, like if it would start to break up, or if it would wear out really quickly, and you'd have an interesting race for the sprint, but come Sunday you'd be back to a more, let's say, normal racing line. And with these sealer coats, they do tend to repel water. So in the rain, what was it going to do? They didn't have any information for that, and we saw that in the sprint qualifying. It was pretty greasy out there.
Yeah, you know what? Speaking of the sprint qualifying, what did you think of that whole stuff with Norris's fake not deleted lap time? The lap time that should have been deleted, that wasn't deleted, that was taken back, that was actually pretty good, and then allowed. I just thought it was interesting that they let this one slide, the one where he legitimately went off the track.
Right. So it seems there was some confusion. I don't know what your set of commentators said about it.
I actually didn't see it. Yeah.
Effectively, what the rule is if you go all four wheels off the track, you lose that lap, and I believe you're supposed to lose the next one as well.
Oh.
Right. So we haven't seen much of that because usually they do a push, cool. So the second lap that they lose isn't for anything anyways. It's usually several seconds slower. So it doesn't matter. In this case, Norris went off on the last corner, on the start-finish straight, and lost a whole lot of time. Usually track limits are in areas where you have the ability to gain time. Because he was so far off the track, he lost quite a bit of time on that lap. And then he went into a push lap.
And just to add, that's the gravel trap that almost ended Carlos Sainz's weekend and almost ended Fernando Alonso's weekend in the race. Like it was a dangerous corner to go off of with Norris.
Yeah, that corner has caught a lot of people out. Giovinazzi had a massive crash there a few years back. And I think Ericsson as well at one point, or maybe it was Verline.
Marcus Ericsson never crashed, Sean. What are you talking about?
Anyway, where are we going with that?
The track limits penalty. He went off.
Yes, yeah. So he went off and lost a whole lot of time and then came back and did a push lap. So the push lap is the one that would have gotten deleted, which is the one that was after the lap he went off on. But what they determined is that he lost enough time on the initial lap where he went four wheels off the track. He lost enough time that he wasn't gaining an advantage. Therefore, the penalty wasn't merited.
Okay, well, I'll just say this. They owe Sergio Perez his 2023 back for all the track limit penalties they gave him for millimeters. Because what I'm going to allude to and what it sounds like, based on what you described, which is just the facts. You're good for this. You always just say the facts. It's me who goes off on crazy tangents. The facts there sound like it was just an arbitrary decision. They picked and chose someone they liked this time to say, okay, there's no point in him losing his lap because that next lap he got pole. And he's a popular driver amongst the youth. They want the youth market. They definitely want the British market. And I'm going to try and keep this nationalistic talk that I always allude to, that British drivers get the preferential treatment. It is another example of that, but we'll just say he's more popular. than anything. Because he's popular, they gave him the pole when they should have taken it. Anybody else would have lost that lap, I think, if that's what the rules call for.
I mean, there's a number of flaws with what you're suggesting. Hamilton was right there with him. I think they would have rather have Hamilton take the pole.
5 years ago, I agree with you. Now I think Norris is way more popular.
I don't.
You don't think so?
No. If it comes down to George, Hamilton, and Norris, I think George is going to get it. If it were some sort of conspiracy like you're suggesting.
Oh, it definitely
But
is.
if it's Hamilton and anybody else, as far as British drivers go, it's going to be Hamilton. But also, this is not new. Going millimeters over the line, you're not losing time. And in the past, we've seen them assign certain corners. Coda is a big one that comes to mind, where they've assigned, I think it's 3 or 4 corners.
Turn 8 is one of them, if I'm not mistaken. Turn 8 and 15.
I think 15 is the more critical one, because that's the one where they tend to go pretty wide. And that's where we saw, I believe, Vettel lose a suspension one year. And it's kind of blind from the cameras as well. So the typical race cameras don't catch it. They've had to start monitoring it with dedicated cameras, because you can run really wide and get a great entry to the corner onto the start-finish straight, right? But if you go off in the S's in Coda, as long as you're not cutting the S's, you're not gaining time, so they don't bother watching it. If you're going millimeters off on these corners that they're watching, they've already deemed that you're going to gain time. Norris was in the gravel with all 4 wheels. There was no way he was gaining time, right? This is the system functioning the way it should. As ridiculous as it sounds, he's gone off. They've flagged him as going off. They've canceled his lap, or they've deleted his laps. And then somebody, a human, has gone in and seen, oh, that doesn't make sense. Give him the lap back because he didn't gain anything. This is what everybody who bitches about track limits and the way that they're enforced, this is what they've been pushing for. Mm-hmm. They've been pushing for, make it more realistic, make it more fair. Well, okay, he didn't gain an advantage, so we're not going to delete his lap.
I know, and we already had this debate, 3 or 4 weeks ago. I don't want to rehash it again. I just think, it's hard to know if they really gained an advantage. And I think I know what you're going to say about that. Like, they have the data to back up that they gained an advantage.
Yes.
In that moment, yeah. It's just, I don't know. I just think it's silly. And I just think it's interesting that they finally had the acted the right way for someone popular, someone British. That's just my 2 cents.
That's just your general hatred coming out. That's all.
Well, there's a lot of hatred. It's equal opportunity hatred. And we're going to get into that today. But yeah, it was an interesting qualifying. I just watched the highlights. That was the one section of the weekend I missed, which is a shame because it sounds like it was very, very interesting at times. The sprint, though, was amazing.
Sprint was good.
I actually thoroughly enjoyed the sprint this time, which is, I know Max came out and said, for the reasons we talked about at the beginning, if you're going to resurface the track, it's really stupid to have a sprint weekend. And if you knew that, we should have maybe waited. We should have had an extra 2 practices instead of
that from the guy who won the fucking sprint race.
But he would have won either way. And
right, why bother talking?
I think it was before anything had happened.
This is ridiculous.
I know, but it's just, he's going to win either way. He knows he's probably going to win either way. It's just, I think it was his way of taking a dig at the sprints again. He doesn't want them. He's made that abundantly clear.
Right. So why bother interviewing him? Why bother interviewing him, period?
Because he's the number 1 driver right now, and that's what I'm about to get into. To answer your early question, my commentators this week, for better and for worse, mostly for worse, was David Croft and Nico Rosberg.
Fucking Rosberg.
Oh my God. Yeah, Sean and I decided a couple weeks ago, he'll take Formula1.com, I'll take Sky Sports. for Canadian viewers, TSN. Wow. He sounded like Joe Biden giving a speech at times. He was just stuttering, mumbling, and just anyway, like he just couldn't be coherent at times. But at times he did make some good points. And he did give some good information. One of which was he was the only one who seemed to pay attention to the fact that during the sprint, Max Verstappen at one point, I think, was a second and a half a lap faster than everybody, or even, I think it was even the second sector. Second sector, he was a second and a lap. Second and a half a lap faster than anybody. Sorry, that makes no sense. A second and a half faster in the second sector. Sometimes during the sprint, which makes sense. He passed Hamilton, I think, lap 9, and in 10 laps, he was 13 seconds ahead. Mm-hmm. Utter insanity.
That goes to show you how good that car is in his hands.
In his hands, exactly. Like, because Perez didn't exactly have an amazing weekend.
When has he?
It's hard. We've talked about it before. It's hard to operate Max's car, but he did what he was supposed to do. If you look at it, qualified second. I think he was in the sprint, fourth or fifth? No, he was third in the sprint. Third in the sprint and third in the race. He did what he had to do other than coming second, I would say. He was one place off doing what he had to do.
Right, which he missed the target.
Hamilton had a great sprint, was what I'm going to get into. I was very impressed with Hamilton in the sprint, only for him to poop his pants 4 hours later. And I feel bad for him. I really do. Like I said last week, I want to be nice to Lewis Hamilton from this point forward, but
it's interesting, and I was thinking about this for part of today. That Mercedes performed really well when it was slowed down.
Explain that.
So qualifying, it was wet, and you have to go slower in the wet. You've got slower tires. They had intermediates, which potentially were the wrong choice. I don't know that there was a right choice of tire. The extreme wets would have been too slow. But the intermediate was not doing it, and we saw that. Max almost didn't set a time in SQ. So as the cars were slowing down, we were like 10 seconds slower in the wet laps than we were in the dry. As the cars slowed down, that Mercedes seemed to perform better. We know this because Hamilton qualified in second and then finished the race in second. And the race wasn't wet, but it was definitely still greasy. There's not a whole lot of support races in China, so it's basically just the F1 rubber that was down. So really what we saw in qualifying and the race is a result of the track rubbering in from the sprint. And once the cars got up to speeds that were, let's say, more realistic, the Mercedes was trash.
So it sounds like there's a power issue, and not necessarily if he's good in slower speeds. It sounds like the balance is there, which is what has been their main complaint, has it not been? That there's no...
Yeah, but this might be a thing where they've gone about it the wrong way, potentially. Like, you want an aerodynamically efficient car, but you don't necessarily want it to pile on drag. So it might be draggy at high speed, which then slows it down, and they may be compensating for that in other areas, which then throw the balance out.
Explain for our listeners, drag is speed, is pure speed, right? Like, I know we use these terms, I just want to...
No, drag is a resistance. So if you have, let's say, a big SUV with a large frontal face on it, right? A lot of surface area in the front, trying to push its way through the air, that's going to generate a lot of drag, because as you try and displace that air, it pushes back. Then you have a more aerodynamic car like any F1 car compared to an SUV, and it slides nicely over the contoured bodywork. So drag is effectively the...
Is it the force pushing it down?
No, because that's down force.
Oh. Correct. Or part, I should have said part of it, but yeah.
That's the misconception. You can't have downforce without drag, but you can have drag without downforce.
Interesting.
Because drag is just the resistance. right? So if I've got it's effectively the surface area, the front surface area of the car. The surface area of the car that's pushing against the air causes your drag, in very basic terms. And then on top of that, drag squares with speed. So if you think about it, if you've got X amount of drag at 10 kilometers an hour and you go to 100 kilometers an hour, it squares all the way along that curve. Right? So if you have very high drag at medium speed, and then you ramp that up to very high speed that these guys hit 320 kilometers an hour at the end of the straight, I think I saw, it can take hundreds of horsepower to overcome the drag at that speed, depending on how much drag there is, right?
So then just to bring it all together, so then this would be an issue then with their front wing, the way that the wing pushes through the drag type of thing, or is it the whole car?
It's the whole car. So there are, yes, the bodywork is very contoured and sculpted, but there are things that have to be there that create drag. And then as the air flows over the body, if it's interrupted in any way by airflow from other parts of the car crossing over it, that's going to create drag as well.
Okay.
And then you have a lot of focus on trying to get the air away from the back of the car. This is something you see on pickup trucks and big semis and box trucks. You have a very square corner at the back, and if you look at it in a wind tunnel or with some sort of simulated flow over it, you get a very low pressure zone right where the bodywork drops off. So there are videos out there of people leaving stuff on like a tonneau cover of a pickup truck and driving 120 kilometers an hour down the highway, and nothing happens to whatever they've loosely left on top of that tonneau cover.
Yeah.
It's because that low pressure zone just kind of sucks it into that area and doesn't allow it to move. That's not what an F1 car wants, because that's going to actually try and pull the car back, right? So that creates drag. So you want all this air to flow over the body of the car very smoothly and continue to move away from the car as it exits the body, which is why the previous generations of cars were so quick but so hard to follow, because they were so efficient at shedding that air, but then as it left the car, it became very turbulent. So anybody passing through it couldn't utilize that to actually clean it up over their bodywork.
So it's called dirty air
Yes.
in that sense, but it's not literal dirty air.
No, it's turbulent.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's Mercedes' problem then, you think? So they have a problem with filtering drag through their car, and so the less speed you're using, like you're saying, you're squaring, or I guess square rooting the amount of drag.
Squaring.
I'm saying as you go less, so it'll be the reverse. So there was less drag.
Yeah,
There was the square root of drag in that instance, so they were able to be a much more competitive car.
Well, what I think the problem is, and I don't have any data to back it up. This is just me looking at the cars go around the circuit. It might be that the complaints that they were getting from Hamilton last year was that there's not enough downforce in the rear. The rear was unstable, so they may have gone the route of trying to generate more downforce. So by making that aero package extremely efficient, you can get more downforce, but downforce always comes with drag. So they may have gone the route of applying too much downforce in the rear, which then made it too draggy. So now they're slowing the car down, which is a complaint that they've had, where they haven't had the speed in the straights. And the balance is off. So they may have done something to make the rear very downforce heavy, but then their front wings might be, let's say, better balanced. So the car turns in, but then they have issues getting the rear end to turn in.
Well, yeah, to your point, they were Hamilton for a while was struggling to catch Esteban Ocon. But yeah, and so if they were struggling to catch the Alpines on the straight, that's very worrisome.
Yes.
But yeah, so then it doesn't still sound like a quick fix. So you can't just now change the wing because you probably have, or the front wing, because then it sounds like you're going to bring a whole other issue of problems.
Well, it depends. They can do a lot of work with the rear wings, because the rear wing is what generates a lot of downforce at the back of the car. And that's something that they can turn around pretty quickly.
Yeah, but your guess is that because of the way the front wing, the rear wing is, it's messing up, or it's not balancing with the front wing. But you're saying they shouldn't adjust the front wing.
I'm not saying they should or shouldn't do anything. I'm suggesting that they may have gone too far to one side.
Okay.
Because they have two drivers who can't develop, as we previously talked about.
Yeah, they don't know exactly what they want, which is the main issue. Yeah.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure Mercedes has very intelligent people looking at all this, and they're trying to figure it out. So it's not as simple as I'm making it sound. But it seems like maybe take some downforce off the rear, and this might not be a problem anymore.
Well, but if, to your point though, he was sliding anyways. Like you saw a few times he slid in that final corner. So they probably can't.
No, but sliding isn't necessarily not enough downforce. They could be trying to overcompensate for not allowing it to turn in by loosening suspension geometry. And then when you loosen the suspension geometry, it's easier to break the tires away, which then leads to a slide.
Oh, okay.
Right? You got to keep in mind that the engine, the gearbox are the last part of the car. Those are the things that are going to swing out. Yes, the tires are at the end, so there's less of a pendulum there. And they put ballast to bring the weight forward. But it is, once you get that rear end moving, it's a lot of momentum to try and stop. So if they are trying to chase an issue where the back end doesn't want to pivot, and they're playing with suspension geometry and changing setups in the, let's say, the mechanical handling characteristic, that might be part of their problem.
You saw, I guess, a bit of that with science, which what you were saying, like that there was a little bit of overcompensation with maybe something what they did with his suspension, and that's what caused the crash in qualifying. That's when you said that, like it might be just when you said exactly those words, I was like, oh, it sounded like science. What happened to science? But that also might have just been the gravel and his stupidity. But
yeah, that was another thing that changed, that they talked about a little bit, but not too much, not as much as how they painted the surface. That gravel trap wasn't gravel previously.
oh, what was it before?
AstroTurf.
Oh, would that be better or worse? I would think probably.
It depends.
Yeah.
So the gravel is going to slow you down a lot more. The AstroTurf, especially when it's wet, becomes extremely slippery. And if you go off there like Sainz did, you're going into the wall on that side.
Oh,
which is potentially more dangerous.
Yeah. He was very lucky, speaking of science. And he did not have a good weekend.
No.
And I don't know what was going on. Maybe it's finally all getting into his head. Maybe all this talk and the behind the scenes. But he was doing good in the sprint, and then he was about to get past Alonso, and then just from that point, his entire weekend unraveled when they touched each other.
Mm-hmm.
And
it didn't even seem like that big of a touch.
I was gonna say, because Alonso got a 10-second penalty in that sprint, which I thought was a little ridiculous,
especially because he retired.
Yeah. Well, that was a whole talking point too. Like they're thinking of closing that loophole, and they might apply it to maybe qualifying or a grid place penalty for next year if something like that happens again, or maybe even for the next sprint.
Yeah, which doesn't make sense to me because we saw that with Danny in the race. With Daniel Ricciardo in the race, where he gets a penalty the next race because he wasn't able to serve a penalty in the race. Like, it's not uncommon to get grid drops, so I don't understand why, unless they were worried about the pushback that Alonso would get a grid penalty for in a Grand Prix for something he did in the sprint, which it's an infraction. If he needs to get a penalty, then he needs to serve a penalty. He should have had a grid drop for the race.
Well, I just don't think they've talked about it publicly enough. If they start, if there's hatred towards the sprints by some of the drivers, and there's already like animosity for the stuff that happened, I guess, a couple races ago at Australia with Alonso getting a harsh penalty and they give him another one. I think it's all of the above is what I'm saying. I don't think they've talked it out enough, these penalty changes, like you're saying, in order to give a basis or to do it in public yet. So I think they just went with the letter of the law in this instance just to avoid some blowback. I'm having trouble speaking today.
Yeah, same. Yeah, I think you're right. But my bigger concern with it is you have one set of rules. Why is there a separate set of rules for the sprint? Because all these whiny-ass drivers decided that they don't like the sprint and they don't want it to impact the race. Well, go fuck yourself. Sprints are nothing new. They've been around in F2 and F3. They're in other series. WEC has sprints.
I get it. It's just it's not traditionally F1.
Sure. But neither is 3 races in the U.S.
That's a very good point. And especially when 2 of those courses suck. Actually, no, sorry, I like Vegas. I shouldn't say that.
Coda's good.
I love Coda.
Miami's
meh.
Yeah.
At best. It's meh. Anyways. Science. I don't know if it's just maybe an outlier, but he seemed to revert to old Carlos Sainz and just went 5th in everything. I think he was 5th in qualifying, if I'm not mistaken. He was 5th in the sprint and 5th in the race.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. I just didn't even pay attention. Off the top of my head, I'm thinking that's exactly what it was. Yeah, because Leclerc got ahead of him. Yeah. Right at the end. And yeah, it was pretty funny what he did to Leclerc. But if I'm unbiased, it was pretty bad. And I can only imagine what was said in that debrief.
I don't know that anything needed to be said.
Well, he slid into him. He basically used Leclerc to stay on the track.
Sure. But we've talked about it before. Why does he care?
Yeah, but you want to go out as the good team player. You don't want to go out Alonso style. I think he knows that. As much as he may admire Alonso, he shouldn't copy him.
But like we mentioned in one of the previous episodes, he's clearly the better Ferrari driver at the moment. Mm. So, fuck him.
Yeah, but that's not how Ferrari's going to see it. That's not how the media sees it. They still hold this candle for Charles. So
right.
I think.
What does Sainz care about Ferrari? They're the ones that didn't renew his contract.
It's all about. We're going to talk about this later when we get to the other backmarker drivers. It's all about fucking perception in the sport, not about reality. Perception has overcome reality in this sport for 20 years now. Reality was Michael Schumacher was doing something amazing from 2000 to 2004. Perception was he was ruining the sport. And perception won. And we got rule changes, and we have what we have now, which is sometimes good, sometimes really bad.
Right, but I mean, the perception is that Yuki Tsunoda isn't worthwhile. The perception is that Logan Sargent isn't worth anything. But why are they there?
Well, Yuki's there for Honda's perception.
Right, and don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting that Yuki is bad. I've actually got a lot to say about Yuki being probably one of the better prospects on the grid at the moment, but
I don't know about that.
Well, there's that perception again.
That's a tough sell. It's just because I have very high standards for what a driver should be. I'll even say too high, because I think unless a driver's consistently finishing in the top 6, you shouldn't give a fuck. I live by 90s rules in my head. You know what I mean? Like,
I know what you mean, but
it's harsh, especially these days with what the league has become. I should probably loosen that to top 8, but he hasn't gotten 8th that many times. He's a 9th to 13th driver. That's why I don't really value him that high. But if you look at the cult of personality around him, especially this early couple months, he's not hated. He's not treated like he's bad.
Right. The only thing I'll say there is you have 4 teams that are legitimately top running teams. 4 teams, 2 cars.
I understand.
8 places.
I agree. And right. I use that argument to shit on Hulkenberg in one of the early therapy episodes. So, yeah, I understand what you're saying.
So, I'm just, you said it, your standards are too high, but you got to look at it a little realistically. If you have 4 teams with 8 drivers that are 1 to 8, the next best driver is 9th place.
I agree. I agree. And actually ahead of him is actually 5 teams. So him finishing in the top 10 is impressive by that logic. However, it speaks to something Jordan and Coulthard have been talking about. More so Jordan has been alluding to in the last couple episodes of Formula for Success, where he says the cars are a lot easier to drive. So you have less, you're not finding greater drivers, you're finding just better operators, essentially, in this new Formula One. Whereas in the past, there was a lot of chaos, I guess you could say, between 4th to 13th. On any given day, it could be anybody in that position, in those positions on any given day. And they're easier to drive. And the point system changed 15 years ago, made a lot of drivers a lot happier with lower positions. He's alluded to this. I'm paraphrasing. It's not what he said. And I don't think he's connected the two in the way I have. I'm doing that. In the sense that, like, remember the story about him and Ralph Schumacher? Mm-hmm. Your history if you don't finish in the top 6? Mm-hmm. That Jordan wasn't very good, but Ralph did it. That's a good driver. Not a great driver, in my opinion, Ralph Schumacher. But that's what I'm trying to get to in a mealy-mouthed way, is that should be your goal. You shouldn't settle for 7th to 10th. And I think if they pushed them to do that, they would find that in them, or they wouldn't, and they'd be gone. They'd be gone a lot sooner.
Sure. And I'm not disagreeing, but at the end of the day, there's only so much that can be done when you have... How do I put this? There's only so much that can be done when the pit stop strategies, or lack thereof, let's say, don't allow for surprises. When it's generally accepted that you're going to be in the pits for 2.5 to 3 seconds with a total pit stop time of 22, 23 seconds, you pretty much know there's a certainty. If I pit here, I'm going to come out behind this person, and then I'll just work my way back up, right? Like we see it with Alonso in the Chinese Grand Prix, where he pits for softs, and he's 12th or 13th, something like that, when he comes out of the pits, but then he works his way back up to 7th, pits again, and then works his way back up. That's all pre-calculated and predetermined by the strategist, because there's no flexibility for it. And yeah, you can say there's some, right? You have a bad stop, or you expect a safety car, you're waiting for a safety car that never comes. Okay.
Ferrari only does that.
But back in the day when they had refueling, and I don't think they need to go this way, but when you had refueling, you didn't know if the team you were fighting against was going to refuel for 10 seconds or 15 seconds. Mm-hmm. That 5 seconds is a big difference.
Yeah, I understand what
Not to mention the pit stops, you were in the box for probably 20 to 30 seconds.
Mm-hmm. No, they were long pit stops. Fast pit stop back in the day. I was looking at the 2000. They said the Ferrari nailed it in the final race at Japan, or second last race in Japan. Ferrari nailed their pit stop 8.9 seconds.
Yeah, exactly.
with fueling and tires. Yeah, it was different. I get what you're saying. You can't compare that logic to what's happening today.
Yes.
What happened with other drivers back in the day isn't going to be the same type of thing you see today.
Yeah. And also, I just want to say, I listened to that episode of Formula for Success and found it a little painful to listen to. Because, okay, Coulthard raced in the 90s and 2000s with cars that were probably a lot more difficult to drive.
Way more.
He's raced the RB19. Well, he hasn't raced. He's driven the RB19. I doubt they had it in full race spec. So for him to come on and say they're easier to drive with that level of experience is a little concerning to me. Because the way they made it sound in that episode is that you or I could get behind the wheel of that thing and drive it in a race.
I get what you're saying. Yeah, he went a little too far. But I think he was just trying to make the point that someone like Alonso, Hülkenberg, Hamilton, they wouldn't be in the league because the painfulness of the car would have made them retire by now.
Sure.
So yeah, it's not that easy. I don't think he was trying to say that, but I get what you're getting at. Yeah.
But if it really was that much of an offset, Alonso should be first place. Alonso and Hamilton should be fighting for first and second because it's so much easier to drive regardless.
I see what you're saying.
Like, it's a stupid fucking comment to make, and it irritates the crap out of me to hear people like that say this because it might be easier for them to drive because they've dealt with cars that were extremely difficult, right? You go back to the 60s and 70s, those cars are death traps.
Yeah.
90% of the guys on the circuits now wouldn't want to race those things in anger on a track with 20 to 25 other cars.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because they were so bad.
How many champions died? Like if you look at the way I don't think it was Fangio, but like there was a couple of champions who died in the past.
Yeah.
Over the like not one, like several.
No, from the 50s through the 80s and into the 90s, you were losing 2 to 3 drivers a year.
Yeah.
It wasn't unheard of for multiple drivers to die in a year.
Yeah, it was testing in 94. Testing Donnelly almost killed himself. Or was that 93?
That was 94.
94. And then Ratzberger and Senna died at Imola. Mm-hmm. And Barrichello almost died. Mm-hmm. And that was normal, like you said. Right. Yeah, I get what you're saying. It's just, and a lot of older people in any sport will look at the modern day and say this is piece of cake. I don't know if you follow basketball at all. Like you hear Charles Barkley and Shaquille O'Neal talking like, oh, if I was in the league today, I would score 40 points a game or 50 points a game. Not necessarily. No. I don't think you'd understand the gameplay. The gameplay has changed. To your point, the way we race has changed.
Right. Now, the cars are slower. Right? These current cars are slower than the end of the last generation. And I want to say I saw something that compared pole laps, and it was like an 8-second difference.
Wow.
So they've slowed down. The cars are heavy. Absolutely. The cars are wide and long. Absolutely. The amount of G-force these guys pull through corners now, because of the ground effect cars, and the fact that they generate so much downforce consistently through the floor, they're pulling 2 to 3 Gs on the low side. And just to be able to have control of your body when you're pulling some of these high-speed corners, China's not a great example of it, but there are other circuits where we have some very high corners like Monza and Imola. It wouldn't be unheard of to see 3 to 4 Gs in some of these corners. And these guys weigh about 160 pounds. So they're light. These are not big men. Mm-hmm. But 160 pounds times 4, that's what they weigh in those corners.
Jesus.
Their head, if your head weighs 10 pounds, it weighs 40 pounds through one of those corners. And you're trying to keep it straight and not have it pull your neck off.
Yeah.
Right? That alone takes more than what Coulthard would have had to do.
Yeah, like Mansell was overweight, notoriously, I think, when he won in 92.
So was Keke Rosberg.
Oh, he's always been overweight.
Exactly.
Anyways, we got a little bit in the weeds there. It was still a good talk. But yeah, let's talk more about the race. Like I said, Max was way ahead. Way ahead. Well, you and I anticipated that.
In the sprint.
In the sprint. Well, I guess in the race he was still pretty far ahead by the end of it.
But not as far as he could have been, or as far as people expected.
Do you think he sandbagged? Or held back? Or was Norris just that fast?
He definitely wasn't pushing all out, but he didn't seem as comfortable. And you heard it at the end of the race where he drove over some debris and he was worried about his tires. Like, there was a little bit of old school, nervous, not so certain about the win, Max. He was certain he was going to win it, don't get me wrong. It was clear he was going to win. But it wasn't as easygoing, Max, as we've seen in the last 4 races.
Well, like I said last week, Japan wasn't, or 2 weeks ago, Japan wasn't exactly easygoing. He wanted to win that. He was trying to prove a point.
Sure, but I don't think it was ever in doubt that he was going to win.
Probably not, but same here, I would say.
Yeah.
And I will add this to your point. You're right. Maybe there was something uncomfortable because Alonso got the fastest lap and he didn't take it from him, which is very uncharacteristically Max.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, do you think? Should we start the rumor here? Should we be worrying about something wrong at Red Bull? No. Okay.
No.
Nice. I tried.
Not even worth it.
I tried. Okay. I have some other notes. This seems to keep us on topic. Solid race from Russell, which is interesting.
Do you have where he finished there?
6th.
Solid nothingness.
Yeah, but that's going to be the entire season.
That's going to be his entire fucking career.
I agree. It's interesting. I told you about Nico Rosberg in his comments, and he said once Lando got out of the car that's one thing we should talk about too. Lando's mistake on the first corner in the sprint, which was once again when presented the opportunity to potentially win, which he wouldn't have. Pooped his pants once again. I can't think of a better analogy than poop your pants. It's the funniest one.
All right.
Slip down some stairs.
Yeah.
Yeah, he slipped down some stairs. There we go. We can finally get away from poop for 5 seconds.
Yeah, and that was an interesting. He almost gave it to Hamilton. Hamilton forced him wide.
Yeah, but I think he had the right to. He had the apex, right?
Well, he wasn't on the apex. That's the problem.
Okay. I see what you're saying.
The proper line is to hug that inside curb and follow it as it tightens, because that opens up, because it goes past 180 degrees, that corner, right? So you turn back in on yourself and then you have to turn out. So you want to hug that corner, that curb, the inside curb, all the way around to open up turn 2. Turn 2, I think it's technically turn 4.
Turn 4 at that point, yeah.
Turn 4. So the fact that he went so far out from it was clear to me he was trying to do what he's done several other races, including the one where he almost killed Max.
Silverstone.
Just to push him wide. Yeah. And because you're right, he was entitled to the line he was on. And if that line he's on just gradually goes wider, you can't technically penalize him for it. And Lando was a little too eager, and he made a similar mistake to the one he made in Sochi, where he didn't want to concede that something had to happen.
Yeah.
Right? In Sochi, when he was leading the race and the rain started to come in, he had the opportunity to be the first person in the pits to put on intermediates and save his race, but he was so paranoid about losing position that he didn't do it, and he ended up in 10th or 12th, something like that.
After penalties, yeah, he had a horrible time. Should have listened to Nikita Mazepin, who knew the rain was coming, if you believe Drive to Survive.
Right. And, sorry, just to finish that, this was the same thing. So they went into that turn, and instead of conceding that he was going to lose a place to Hamilton, that he could potentially get back on the straight, on the same lap.
With a faster car, yeah.
He pushed it too far, went way off the track, and ended up coming out of turn 4 in 7th place.
Yeah. Very, very childish, very rookie mistake. Just to bring it all back to Russell, to Rosberg, what I was talking about. Because, sorry, everybody, I do have points when I go on these big tangents. Is that Rosberg called Russell and Norris future champions.
In the way that Rosberg is champion.
Exactly. Exactly. If Russell ever sneaks one, he's got to retire right away. Because that's the best he'll ever get. Yeah. Solid race from Russell doesn't mean amazing.
Sure.
He's doing what he can comparative to Hamilton. We saw this in 2022. And I think you nailed it. This is it. This might be it. And there's a lot of talk about, I saw one video saying, doesn't matter who gets the Mercedes seat in 2025, it's going to be Antonelli's in 2026. I don't know about that. Because maybe Antonelli replaces Russell. There's this belief that just Russell is going to be this champion one day. Belief that he's just there for the future. But I don't know. I don't know anymore. Because this is not what Mercedes needs. Even though it's solid, they want to win.
Yeah, the problem, this is almost a conflict of interest issue. Because George is Toto's boy prince, right? I'm pretty sure Toto manages him.
He manages everybody, though.
Well, he manages everybody because he manages a bunch of drivers who he shoehorns in, like Antonelli will eventually be. And that's the point.
Thanks for Esteban Ocon, Toto.
Yeah,
Anyway, yeah.
exactly. But Ocon wasn't as highly valued as George because look where Ocon ended up,
It's true.
right? So George got shoehorned into Williams through a sweetheart deal of a discount on powertrains if they take George. Spend a couple of years circulating at the back with Williams until we have a seat and a reason to replace Valtteri Bottas. And there's George. Has he done half of what Bottas did for Mercedes?
No, not even close.
No. But I guarantee you he sticks around until Toto can shoehorn another, young up-and-coming star that he thinks is going to be a champion who will not amount to anything. Because let's remember, the champion at Mercedes at the moment was there before Toto even existed.
That's a good point.
Toto
That's
didn't bring him in. Niki Lauda did.
Yeah. That's a very good point. So basically what you're saying is Toto doesn't know what a champion is.
By all accounts, every driver that Toto has brought in has not amounted to a champion.
That doesn't sound good for Mick Schumacher. Yeah. So we kind of alluded to this then last week. Is he part of the problem, if not the problem?
Toto?
Right? Toto. Because he's, like we said, he's not really in on the engineering. He's just the boss. He's just there as a figurehead. Figureheads can be good in some cases, like Jean Todt was, like Christian Horner is.
Mm-hmm. And I mentioned it in the last one, too. I think Toto's been good for the team. He's been the leader that they needed through that period of time. But 2021 broke him. And I'm sure Toto is talking to somebody, but clearly it's not doing enough.
Horner actually said this really well. Because I'll say this. It's easy to be a good leader when your team's winning. When you come into a winning team, it's easy to keep everything going.
Mm-hmm.
Horner alluded to this in, I think it was the Drive to Survive for 2022. He said he's never built anything. So this is going to be his toughest challenge. He's going backwards.
Sorry, he was referring to Toto with that, not himself?
Yes, so.
Because I was going to say, he's contradicting himself there, but okay.
Theoretically, it was him who pushed Max, right? Horner? Or was that more Marco?
That was Marco.
Okay. Did Horner bring in Newey?
Yep. Horner took that team from the failed Jaguar team to what it is today. Horner also built the Arden teams, which are not F1 teams, but they're Formula 3000, Formula 3, Formula 2, I believe Arden is no longer in, but Arden is a large team outside of F1 that started with Horner in a trailer. Right? He's no longer involved with it,
but he had more of a role.
Oh, absolutely.
Than Toto did, I guess is what he's saying.
Yeah.
You're right, and that's a good point. It's easy to shit on somebody when you're winning. So maybe, because like when the pendulum was down, Horner, it took you still 8 years. So Toto's in year 4 now, or 3 of not winning. Mm-hmm. So he might just be getting worse before it gets better, but I don't know. I don't understand. Like, seeing Mercedes like this it's very disappointing. If Alonso stayed in that sprint, I think Aston Martin is ahead of them in the points. And despite all of Lance Stroll's best efforts, Aston Martin might still pass them.
Mm-hmm. It's possible.
I don't know. Like, I know we talk about this every week. I feel bad. I do. I feel like it'd be better if we had them as like slightly stronger. Like, if they would kill for 2022 Mercedes right now.
Sorry, if that happens, if Aston Martin passes them, that only leaves one Mercedes-powered team behind them.
which is a team that may not score a point either this year.
Right. That's a little scary.
It's like I'm saying, it may just be getting worse before it gets better, but there's no real evidence of that. You're about to lose Lewis Hamilton, which you and I have kind of alluded to may be part of the solution because he doesn't know how to develop. But it's also not a good thing. He can operate good cars.
Yeah, and I don't want to go so far as to say he can't develop. He can't develop a bad car. He can maintain a good car, if that makes sense. Because we've seen drivers like Alonso go into good teams and make them worse. That didn't happen with Hamilton.
Okay, that's a good point.
He went into good teams and they stayed good.
Mm-hmm. That's a very good point. Yeah, 2007 McLaren Mercedes could have fallen off a cliff if he wasn't careful.
Right.
And he didn't. So, yeah, we'll give him that. So he's a good maintainer, yeah, not necessarily a good developer. But what they need right now is someone who can start it from scratch, which out of all the drivers available right now, Sebastian Vettel? Maybe? Sort of? Sometimes?
No, Vettel I'd say can develop. But I don't know that he actually wants to come back and do that.
He says he wants a good package. Phrasing. He says he wants a good team, I guess is what he's alluding to, like a good engine, all that. But who would want you 2 years out of the sport that's good? Like Ferrari doesn't want you, Red Bull can't take you.
Yeah, I can't explain why, but I feel like the next time we see Sebastian Vettel on an F1 grid, it will not be as a driver.
I think you're thinking team principal?
Team principal or some sort of advisor like Marco. To me, it doesn't feel like he wants to race at that level anymore. We're seeing him in Porsche, or testing for Porsche in WEC. We're seeing him do a couple of things here and there, but the vibe I'm getting from him and what I've heard since he's retired kind of sounds like he's looking for a way to get back in a more, let's say, office environment.
They've always said he had the chops. I don't trust what they have to say. Like the commentators, they had the chops to be a team principal, but I don't know. Maybe. You could do worse.
You could.
I got off topic with Norris. Did you think? Like, do you think he's turning the corner finally? He's been having a tough time this early part of the season. Do you think this is the turning point for him?
Well, I listened to his interview. I think it was after the sprint, and they were asking him questions, and I'll give him a little bit of credit because these questions were pretty fucking stupid. They're questions about, do you trust the team now? Or does the team have your confidence now? And his statements were basically, they've always had my confidence. I've always trusted the team. But in a way that was, one, trying to stick it to the interviewer, like he was fed up with the question. But at the same time, you and I have talked about it, where his comments in interviews when the car wasn't good were not that.
No.
Right? So you shouldn't be frustrated with the interviewer asking those questions because the image you've put out is that you don't trust the team. So back to your question. Yeah, the car's turned a corner and Lando is capitalizing on it. But I think the problem is still the same one that we talked about. That he's putting too much emphasis on needing the right hardware and not enough on how do I get the most out of what I have.
Yeah, and Rosberg said it, which was one of the good comments he made. He's trying so hard to win that he's losing. He didn't say it like that, but that's what I'm paraphrasing. He's so focused on this win that he's making, like you said, a huge mistake in that first turn in the sprint.
Mm-hmm.
And when you could have came in second, like come out of that turn second and fought for first, instead you're seventh.
Yeah.
Very rookie mistake, very childish, very short-term thinking, like we talked about last week. It's because he's scared to lose. He doesn't want to lose again. He doesn't want this monkeyer of like the, what is it now, 110, 115 races without a win. He doesn't want that.
Yeah.
And I think it's holding him back. And I think Rosberg sort of said if he wins, he might not stop winning. But he may never win. What you just said, with his attitude, he may never win.
Yeah, and I think what we're trying to get at is he's his own worst enemy.
Yes.
He needs to get out of his own head and realize that, especially even in a sprint, which is supposed to be a short race, is still long enough that you could have lost that one position and won the race.
Mm-hmm. Verstappen struggled for 5 laps before he got into a groove. 5 laps.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like you need to have that long-term thinking,
Yeah.
Lando, yeah.
And it's a track that Lando has been to before, although not... We were the last there 5 years ago, so I think he's raced there once.
I think he started 2018. Might have been there twice. I think.
Okay, well, 2019 didn't end well for him. It ended turn 4.
Danny Kvyat.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So he doesn't have a whole lot of experience there. But that shouldn't be anything because he did have practice. He had qualifying. It's clear that he knows the track still. So I'm not going to give him that. But yeah, he really needs to just... I don't even know how to describe it other than win, like you said. He needs to win one and then realize, oh, that's all there is to it. Mm-hmm. Making it sound extremely easy, which it isn't. But I think Rosberg's probably not wrong in that. Like once he realizes, oh, shit, I can just take a breath and lose that one position and then still win the race, and then we may see championship material out of him. Mm-hmm. But as it is... No, he's too far in his own head to do that.
Yeah. This year's critical. We said that preseason. If he doesn't win a race this year, he'll never win a race. More than likely, I think.
I mean, if he ends up in the series as long as Alonso has, you never know. But
yeah, that's a good point. And it might happen based on what Jordan and Coulthard allude to.
But I mean, at some point, you got to kind of give into it and lean into that record, right? If he's there for 15 years and he's never won a race, I think he's got to stick around as long as he can to make that record unbreakable.
Oh, well, ask Nico Hulkenberg how
well, his
unbreakable.
Even worse.
Yeah. I was going to say, ask Nico Hulkenberg how that works out, because I thought you were going to say to try and break it, but it doesn't happen. You're right. Yeah, I think Nico's trying to set like an Ironman of 300 Grand Prix without a podium. I think he's, like you said, leaning into it now. We'll just touch on Piastri quickly because you and I, as usual, we talked way too much and wouldn't change it for the world. I texted you after the sprint and then after the... I guess I don't think I texted you after the race because I want to talk about it now. Piastri, I'm starting to worry that he's turning more into Mark Webber than into Sebastian Vettel. Last couple races have just been very disappointing. He's out in no man's land. He's just sort of there. Not qualifying them particularly well, not racing particularly well. His pace is way off of Lando's.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what it's going to take for him to get back into it. It might just be a case like Webber. Webber was good at certain tracks out of nowhere.
Could be.
And so Webber's not a terrible career to have. It's not my favorite if you ask me, but I don't know. Like, I don't know what he has to do. Like, maybe this is where he being too calm is a problem. Maybe he needs to give himself some pressure now. Maybe he needs to be a little hungrier and be mad. Get a little anger out of him. Get a rise. Get a little emotion. Could do him some good.
I disagree, but that's just on principle. The one thing I'll say about Piastri is he did have considerable damage to the diffuser from where Ricciardo went into the back of him.
But he was out in no man's land before that.
Right. He shouldn't have been there to get hit by Ricciardo. Mm-hmm. But that definitely didn't help him. He may have been able to come back if that didn't happen, but he shouldn't have been there. Mm. And yeah, it was a little unfortunate to see that gap because he wasn't on it all weekend. It was an odd weekend. But this might be the same thing we saw from Hamilton. For whatever reason, it just wasn't coming together. Could have been the lack of practice, could have been the changeable surface, going from, let's say, a new green surface to partially rubbered in, back to green after the rain. You know, who knows?
Maybe, but like I said, this is why I use Mark Webber. Webber was prone to this shit, where there's weekends where he crushes Vettel, goes on the radio and saying, yeah, not bad for a number 2 driver, eh? Gets in everybody's head, makes that quip like, hey, maybe you should support me more, and then comes out the next week and does nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what I worried about, right? Like, yeah.
Yeah, and it's similar to what we saw from Bottas as well, especially his last year at Mercedes, where he had some really good standout races where he won and Hamilton was absolutely obliterated by him. And then we had some terrible races from him, right? And this just might be the type of driver that he is. I hope not. I hope this is him. You know, the car has been changing. So maybe this is just him coming to grips with a Lando-centric car, or going from a, let's say, more neutral car to a Lando-centric car.
That's fair. And let's use our monkier of the early part of the season. It's early. It's only his second year. I'm not in panic mode. I'm just starting to ring up the flag a little bit. The Mark Webber flag. I'm just starting. I could always pull it back. But like, if this was a pirate ship, I'm just what's the word? Ringing it up or rolling it up or
Hoisting.
There we go. I'm just starting to pull the levers, pull the rope. The flag's slowly coming up, but I'm doing it very slowly.
I don't think that flag can get to the top until Piastri starts going airborne. Just putting it out there.
The Lance Stroll could make that happen.
Did it to Danny. Let's talk about that. You said you had some thoughts on that Danny Stroll clusterfuck. Get us going. All right. So I was trying to put together a video to show how ridiculous this whole thing was, but I ran into some technical issues, so that video is not going to happen. This goes back to what I was saying about Lance Stroll the other day, about potentially him dying in an F1 car from his own stupidity. So Bottas's engine went, and he pulled off the track, and it was a double-waved yellow. Lance was on track right out of the pits kind of as that happened. So he's coming out of the pits as Bottas is going out on turn 10. So yellows get waved. We go pretty quickly into a VSC.
Mm-hmm.
As the VSC is triggered, he's behind Yuki. Yuki is behind Danny. He turns a corner as the VSC comes out, goes through, I think, 1 or 2 more corners, and almost biffs it into the back of Tsunoda. Completely on his own, in the middle of a VSC, after his engineer has told him 3 or 4 times at that point, watch your delta, stay positive, which means he's going too fast. So he's going too fast behind the VSC that he knows is there. Almost hits Yuki. They go through another lap or 2. Yuki peels into the pits. So now Stroll is behind Ricciardo. It's now a full safety car. And they're just circulating and circulating. And the whole time, Lance's engineer is telling him, your front brakes are cold. We need some hard stops. Watch your delta. Stay positive. So he's going too fast and his brakes are too cold. And then as they're coming up to the end of the safety car period, his engineer's on the radio again. Make sure we get some hard stops at the end of the straight. Hard stop, charge on, walking him through the procedure, but emphasizing brake temperature, tire temperature. Let's get some high-speed weaving.
Unbelievable.
So he's driving too fast on cold brakes and cold tires. And then to top it off, goes into the hairpin, and I think it was Jolyn Palmer, was saying that hairpin, you don't want to be on the inside because the natural inclination is to take the outside, and if someone needs to escape, the only place they have to go is the inside. So you're always cautious to go to the inside, because if someone fucks up a breaking point like Stroll did, the only place to go is the inside, and then you're the one who gets taken out, right? So you can see it pretty clearly. There's 6 cars, all nose to tail, rounding that corner. It looks like an actual chain link between them.
Which, just to be fair, Alonso did, lock his brakes.
Yeah.
Started the instant. But yeah, go on.
Right. But through that chain of 6 cars, they all managed to slow themselves down to not hit Alonso.
Yes.
And Stroll, you can see it, and Daniel mentioned this in his interview, wasn't looking in front of him.
No.
He was looking at the apex that he doesn't need to look at because they're not at racing speed. He's not racing anybody. All he's got to do is stay behind the fucking car in front of him.
What you're sounding like, the picture you're painting here, it sounds like he's sleepwalking when he's in this car.
Yes.
He's just not really paying attention, and that's worrisome at high speeds. So then what is this kid driving on? Just instinct from Formula 3?
At this point, I don't think he's driving on anything. This is why I've said I think he's going to end up getting himself killed. And then to hit the car that hard from behind, when you've got what is clearly a line of cars around that corner, and it's not there's a car in front of Daniel and he can't see him because you're so low in the cockpit. You can see around the corner. It's a lineup of fucking cars. And to go into the car in front of you that hard, that fast, and then blame the fucking car for hitting the brakes?
Yeah. That's what killed Ricardo. Ricardo said, I was fine until I heard that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what was Ricardo to do?
That comment alone should have had him black flagged.
Yeah.
That is the stupidest fucking thing.
I can't believe I said he would have a great season this year, because he just looks dumber and more useless by the day. What can, there's no way he's kept on that team next year, is there?
Oh, absolutely.
There's new investors coming in, apparently.
Not enough.
This is bad. This is really bad now. Because that car is good enough to consistently be 9th or 10th.
That car is good enough to outpace the Mercedes.
Yes, he's not going to do that against Russell and Hamilton. He's nowhere
But
near.
we're not talking about him. We're talking about the car. It's clear the car can outpace the Mercedes.
Okay, that's fair. I think his max is 9th or 10th, but he's not even getting that, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, I get that.
Yeah.
We're just saying, with somebody else in that car, you could absolutely be head and shoulders above what Mercedes is getting.
Maybe I think more equal. Alonso's not exactly head and shoulders above them, is he? It doesn't seem like he's killing them. I think he's about the same pace as Russell.
He isn't, but we've talked about why that is with Alonso.
Mm-hmm. So, I don't know. I have a whole point here. I wrote down in my notes, Hülkenberg, Magnussen, Stroll, Zhou, Sargent are useless at this point. I know I'm being harsh on Hülkenberg.
Yeah.
But from what I saw, I know we just went into Stroll, but it's a broader point. That whole back half now, which Stroll is a part of and he shouldn't be, on any given week, is just there.
Mm-hmm.
What are we doing here? How are there at any given time, what is it, 5 drivers, and I'm not even including Ocon and Gasly, so that's 7, potentially, that are just there. They're just filling up space. And kudos to Hülkenberg for at least getting consistent points now, but he's not exactly killing it.
I mean, I don't disagree. And if you want to take it even further, I would say it's half the grid.
Wow. Okay, yeah, because we didn't even include Danny, which is what I'm guessing you're going to add.
No, I was going to say Bottas.
Yeah.
Right? If you look...
I think Bottas would have got points this week. I think the Ferrari engine let him down. And we'd have a different thought on Bottas.
I don't think it was the engine. The fact that they couldn't move the car tells me it was a gearbox.
Oh, okay.
And that's not a Ferrari gearbox.
Okay. So then it's just... Sauber is just hopeless then.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with you that I think he could have got points, and I was hoping he would get points this weekend. But for my fantasy team. But no, that didn't happen. So you have your list of 7 drivers. I think did your 7, include Ocon and Gasly?
Yes.
Okay.
Also, I put a question mark next to Albon. I did put a question mark next to Bottas. I didn't include Danny Rick, which you could. I didn't include Russell.
Right.
Like, there's a lot.
Yeah. I guess the point I'm trying to get across is if you were to take a good hard look at the grid, you could probably justify getting rid of half of them.
Easily. Yeah.
Right. And maybe that needs to happen.
It's looking like that more and more every week. Right? Like we haven't even talked about Magnussen's joyride that he had this weekend. Like that was pointless. What was he doing on the track there? Just completely in the way of everybody, causing problems. Zhou, like this is your home race, a lot on the line. You could have given it something. You had good pit stops for once. Mm-hmm. And still, he was just there, just being passed by everybody. Ditto to Sargent, who somehow went from 12th to 17th with a blink.
Yeah, as far as I can tell, nothing went wrong for Sargent.
No. Didn't spin this time, was pretty steady, but still just couldn't keep up.
Mm-hmm.
And he did spin somewhere, though, actually.
I want to say it was in qualifying.
Yes. Yeah, okay, that was right, yeah. Spun, I think it was the same place that Sainz spun. No, it wasn't. No. But still, like, once again, starting last place, starting from the pit. Completely useless. He needs to go now.
Which, I didn't catch it, but did you catch why he had to start from pit lane?
No, they didn't mention it. Probably had something to do with that spin. I imagine probably damaged something under the floor. We'll look into it. Everybody.
No, but the floor shouldn't have... Usually you start from the pit lane if you have changed something that is different than what you qualified in.
Mm.
Like, for example, if you were to have qualified or gotten a time on the board with a certain specification of front wing and then biffed it and broke that wing and had to go to an older level wing, he would have had to start from pit lane because it's not the same specification that he went to Parc Fermé with. If you have to build up a new chassis, you have to start from pit lane. If you have to change a gearbox, usually that's a pit lane start. Engine change. Anything after Parc Fermé that is changing as far as a large component requires a pit lane. As far as I'm aware, none of that changed for him. So I'm not sure why.
I don't know. I guess we'll have to look into that.
Because nothing happened in the sprint with him, right?
No, he was just there again. One of those things that I'm pretty sure he finished second last because Hulkenberg was having a tough time.
Yeah,
quite the turn.
It's a mystery to me why he started from pit lane. But.
Yeah. Do you want to go into, before we move on, Danny Rick? Do you have anything else to add about him? Do you think he's maybe turning the corner? He did improve.
I made a comment on Instagram, I think Friday or Saturday, whatever it was.
I saw it, yeah.
Saying that they may have just swapped the chassis between the two of them because that was quite an offset.
Yeah, it's basically the same delta.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's very interesting.
So I don't know exactly what happened there, but that was an interesting turn of events. His performance in the race wasn't terrible until he got hit. I mean, he's not being as aggressive as his reputation would suggest that he should be. Right? We're seeing him lose places to unlikely people. He maintained the position, more or less. So you can't blame him too much, but he was losing places here and there.
Yeah, the started 12th, was 15th right away, barely ahead of Tsunoda.
Right.
And he was having a better weekend. Like I texted you right away, he should be ashamed. That first stint was awful. His second stint was good though.
Yeah. And that's just that, like, his second stint seemed counterintuitive, but in a race like that, you never know if it's going to pay off. And I think if he had stayed in the race, it potentially would have paid off.
Yeah, well, probably not, because apparently AlphaTauri or RB took Ferrari strategists from them and had 2 chances to pit him. for tires. I know we talked about this off the microphone, but like,
Yeah, but the safety car came out in 9-lap-old mediums is what he had, which doesn't justify losing all that track position.
well, and with the safety car, you're right back up against them. You're on the hards. You're faster than most of the back half.
Yeah, but they were saying there wasn't really any difference between the medium and the hard. That's what the data was saying, and I spent a lot of time watching different onboards trying to analyze the clusterfuck of that safety car. The message that was coming through is that the hard had higher degradation than was expected, and that there was virtually no difference between the medium and the hard.
Oh, so the medium could have lasted.
That was what they were thinking. The medium could have lasted. It would have made a difficult end to the race, but that would have put Danny in a position where, if they had tried to pull it off, could have saw him fairly high in the points.
Especially with Alonso pitting. But I'm just doing the calculation in my head. 9 laps at that point. I think it was lap 27. So that's 18 to 56. That's 40. That's 38 laps on mediums. That's unheard of. That's Albon style right there.
Well, and that's, I think, the kind of bold strategy that they need to go for if they want to get good points in that. So, you're right, it's extremely long. But if he were to get up high enough, like if he were to be in 4th place when they needed to replace those tires, they could have potentially thrown on a soft and done something, right? Like Alonso tried to do.
That's true, yeah. But my instinct as we talk about that is Hülkenberg finished 10th. If he's 13th after that virtual safety car after pitting from 9th or 14th, even 15th, he would have caught Hülkenberg for sure.
Yeah.
I think, like, you know what I mean? Like, why not? Why not? I think.
Yeah. And
at that point, but yeah.
But given the performance we've seen from Danny, I think the risk of it was you lose track position and he doesn't go anywhere. Because that has happened in basically the last 4 races.
Definitely happened in Bahrain.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the other thing with Danny is he got a 3-place grid drop for the next race, which they didn't cover properly in the race as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, I had no idea it had happened. Who did he pass on the safety car?
Hülkenberg. So what ended up happening was Stroll ran into the back of him. He ran into the back of Piastri. Ricciardo and Stroll ended up going straight on at the hairpin. Hülkenberg was behind Stroll, or Hülkenberg was behind Yuki, who was behind Stroll. And when that crash happened, Hülkenberg did what he needed to and went to the inside, past both of them, which is allowed because they had been in an accident together and were no longer on the racing line, is what they consider it as part of the rules for a safety car.
That's a weird rule.
No, it makes sense, because what's Hülkenberg supposed to do? Stop on track and wait for them to get back and potentially not get back?
No, I'm just thinking, I'm extrapolating in the sense that why wouldn't Danny take that place back? It's not really a...
Because they went racing again.
No, but like they're still under the safety car at that point.
No.
Oh, so Danny... Oh.
So they went straight on. Hülkenberg passed them before they got to the control line. The control line is where the safety car period ends. You're not allowed to overtake until the safety car has gone in. The lead driver has led the pack off, back to racing speed, and past the control line.
Oh, but they went racing right away. I thought there was still a few laps until
No.
that happened. Oh.
No, so that was right after this, or sorry.
Right as the safety car was ending.
Yeah, so they were at the hairpin. The safety car would have been on the pit entry, basically, and Max was leading them off. So Max was probably at the control line when that accident happened, but everybody has to pass that control line before they can overtake. So Max was past it. Whoever was in second at the time was probably past it and could have been fighting Max. But if you're on the other side of that control line, you can't overtake. So Hülkenberg was allowed to because Stroll hit Ricciardo and they both went off. They were no longer on the racing line. There was no ability, or it was very clear that they weren't going to be rejoining right away. Right? Then they cross that control line and they're back to green flag racing. 5-6 corners later, Magnussen just decides to assault Yuki, and then they're back under safety car.
Oh, and that's when Ricardo passed Hulkenberg.
Yes.
Oh,
because
okay.
he felt that Hulkenberg passing him wasn't justified under the previous safety car, which frankly is just a stupid decision from Daniel. Because, again, watching the onboard, he asked his engineers about it. They said, hold on, don't do anything, we're trying to confirm. And then he literally said over the radio something along the lines of, forget it, I'm doing it.
Oof. Okay. Okay, so then that penalty does make sense then.
He absolutely deserves a penalty. It's just frustrating that that's the case.
Mm-hmm. He feels slighted. It's not his fault. He's angry in the moment, and he makes a bad decision, quite frankly.
Yeah, pretty much.
So Lance Stroll is ruining everybody's life right now, by the sounds of it. For the good of humanity, we need to get him off the track.
I think if Lance Stroll were to be off the grid, there would be a collective audible sigh around the world.
War stop. No more Israel-Palestine. No more Russia-Ukraine. World peace tomorrow. Who knows?
That's a bold prediction, but...
Vladimir Putin comes on TV speaking Russian. Translator underneath. Thank you for getting rid of Lance Stroll. And he pulls his troops out.
That's all I wanted.
That's all. I've been trying to tell you didn't listen to me. I had this question for you off microphone, and we'll just ask it quickly. Is Hulkenberg really going to be on the grid next year?
Yeah, I think so.
Go say what you need to say.
You're going to hate it, but I think the fact that he's getting 1 point, 2 points, is what's keeping him there, especially races like Saudi Arabia and China, where he's getting significantly higher positions than K-Mag. Right? He's 4 places ahead of K-Mag. K-Mag's at the back with 50 seconds worth of penalties because he's a fucking idiot.
He's got to go. We can both agree he's done.
Yeah, he has to.
Yeah. Anyway.
So the fact that K-Mag is so bad and such an asshole is making Hulkenberg look better.
Yeah, but that's not a reason to keep Hulkenberg either. Just because they were both bad decisions and one is slightly better.
Oh, I agree.
They're slightly less worse. You don't keep him because look at his delta now compared to what he used to be. I railed that he used to be a 7th place finisher. Like his average was 7th. His average is now 10th. Because if you look at Australia, it was a last lap crash. Yeah, well, like we said, good for you for being there. I'm coming around to that mentality that you have to be in the position to get that position. But realistically, they're all 10ths. So he's now 3 places worse than he used to be.
Right.
So you're now going to go to a worse team. He can't, like, potentially, we're talking about Audi or Sauber, which is what the rumor is. He's not, or Haas. He can't develop either of them. His best is going to be 10th place. And he's getting older and was never good to begin with. So what is the team really banking on by having him here?
But here's the problem. I don't think anybody gives Haas credit for the success that they have. K-Mag is throwing it off because he's so bad that people think the Haas hasn't improved. So those performances from Nico are standout performances because he's got a terrible car and he's getting into the points, which I don't think is the case. I think the car has improved. K-Mag can't drive it. Mm-hmm. Hulkenberg is getting the bare minimum out of it, and it makes him look like a hero.
Yeah, I can agree that like it's definitely going in the right direction under Komatsu, and it may even be Hulkenberg that's putting it in the right direction too. But I think what I'm getting at is I think this is it. What we're seeing, like it's probably going to be 20 points, 20 tenths. Mm-hmm. That's like I don't know. I just don't think that's still worse than 2022. They're still trending down.
Yeah, but this is the same nonsense we saw with Steiner when they got Mick Schumacher, right? You have a German sponsor, they want a German driver. The Germans are very proud people. Mm-hmm. There's absolutely no way Audi is coming into the sport without having a German driver.
Sebastian Vettel, Mick Schumacher.
Sebastian Vettel, I think, is going to want far too much money to do that, especially in an unknown. right? You say the worst team, but you have to realize the Audi team is not going to be the Sauber team.
They're still going to start from Sauber position, though. So it's going to be a while. They'll need someone to put it in the right direction.
Well, again, Audi has invested a shit ton of money in their facilities. So while, yes, it will be the Sauber team, when they come online as Audi, they will have an extensive addition to that team. They've already set up their facilities in Germany for engine manufacturing and testing. So they've got dynos set up, they've got engine facilities set up, they've got a test track being built, right? They're already integrating Audi into Sauber. So this isn't just taking over Sauber like Alpha did and putting an Alpha badge on it. This is actually Audi saying, along the lines of what BMW did, here's everything we can throw at it because we want to take it seriously. Now, I'm not suggesting they're going to come in and be competitive. But if anybody has a chance to do so, the money and the resources that Audi are throwing at it would suggest that that's the case, that they are at least attempting to be competitive. Whereas this year and next year, Sauber's basically consigned themselves to it is what it is. As much as I hate that phrase, that's what they're doing.
And that's why we may still see Bottas and Zhou in that car next year, in spite of their ineptitude. But that brings up a good point, because if I am going to say that bad direction makes a bad team with Steiner, new direction could theoretically put Audi or Sauber next year in the right direction. So I can't be hypocritical. I have to stay consistent.
Yeah. So let's just be clear. Next year it is still Sauber. The contracts for both drivers are up. And there's been some, at least the discussion has been that Audi wants a consistent driver lineup before they start. So the contracts are up. Audi's not coming in until 26, but they want their drivers to be integrated into the team before they come in. So that's why there's the push now to get the Audi drivers, right? Because then you could say, why not just sign whoever for 1-year contracts? Because Audi doesn't want to start a new team with new drivers.
Yeah, that's a recipe for disaster. How arrogant of Bottas then the last couple of years, saying it makes sense for me to stick around when they become Audi, acting as if like the seat's mine and doing nothing to prove that that's his seat. So yeah.
And I guarantee you he's talking to Audi as well, or his management is talking to Audi.
I think it'll be futile. I think he fucked himself. Yeah, but anyways.
It might be, but we never know. Also, contracts work two ways, right? There's a lot of hype over Sainz. The rumor mill suggests that Sainz is the one that Audi wants. I don't particularly know why, other than the connection between Audi and Sainz Junior or Sainz Senior. I don't know if that's enough to justify bringing his son in. Especially for the amounts that they're talking about. That being said, Sainz has proven that he can do what they want.
Sometimes. Which this, like I said, we said earlier on this weekend, this was the curious case of the old Sainz. We thought he had become new Sainz.
Sure.
So he can't do stuff like this without it, yeah.
But this is my point. So they think they want Sainz, but the hype that Sainz has built around himself now might make him a little arrogant, and he might go back to Audi and say, this is what I want. And they may turn around and say, well, okay, we're going to go with whoever, Schumacher.
Which brings out the Sainz taking a year off theory, the Eddie Jordan theory, which I don't know if that'll work for him. May not be smart for Sainz, but you're right. If he's arrogant, that might be the case.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I think Mick Schumacher does make a little bit of sense there, but I don't know. As the day goes by, as the days go by, it doesn't sound like the grid wants them. Like, it doesn't sound like the grid wants to do the in-depth analysis that you did, the past analysis that I did about him. I'm bringing that up for Hulkenberg because, yeah, you're right. If they want a German driver, unfortunately, he does make some sense. I'm just saying, like, what are you really banking on? If you're Audi, like, what's the goal with him?
Yeah, and I would agree with that. Like, okay, he looks like a bit of a hero at Haas, but realistically, when you look at it, you're not going to get what they're expecting.
No.
And frankly, if they're going to gamble on Hulkenberg, they should gamble on the F3 driver. What's her name? Sophia Flourish.
You bring in a woman too, you could get some brownie points.
My point is that she's a complete unproven entity in F3 who's doing mediocre. Like, if you're going to gamble on something and you want a German driver and that's your only criteria, fucking why not?
This would be perfect position for the boy from Barbados. Absolutely perfect position for him. But he unfortunately doesn't have the right flag next to his name.
Well, I mean, you never know how much German might be in him in that part of the world, but
if he was Argentinian, that would make sense. Wow, great book, Finding Hitler, or Grey Wolf is what it's called. If you ever want to read a guy did an in-depth analysis about where Hitler went after the war, and they think, based on Hitler's lackey or assistant Martin Bormann, there's positive proof he lived in Argentina the rest of his life, that he did not die in that bunker.
And that concludes Nick's conspiracy theory moment.
And it usually is around hour 40. Like, yeah.
Hour 40. We've been going for that long?
Yeah. We're about to wrap up anyways soon. It's just, yeah, there's so many other options than Hulkenberg. And like I talked about earlier in the episode, perception versus reality. The perception around Hulkenberg is not the reality. And I railed about that in the early therapy episodes, talking about his 2023 season, which was really bad. It was not 9 points. It was like one Grand Prix he scored a point in. You know what I mean? Like, let's just call it is. It is what it is. He was outscored two more times. Magnussen scored 2 more points finishes than Hulkenberg. Yeah, Hulkenberg's was higher after default, like after reclassification. But realistically, Magnussen beat him 3-2.
Sure.
And I'm just saying, like, neither of them should be on the grid. And we have to stop this perception that, like, oh, he's finally going to figure it out. He deserves a better position. He deserves a better car. No. You could give him that Red Bull, he'd still find a way to finish 6th. If Perez is having a hard time finishing in the top 3, and Perez consistently beat Hulkenberg back in the day.
Yeah, you're not wrong. And frankly, I think that's enough on Hulkenberg.
You're right. I already promised that.
Yeah.
I just have one more note. It's just never going to happen for Sauber, is it?
So I don't necessarily agree that it won't ever happen for Sauber. And I assume you're talking about won't ever happen as in they won't ever amount to anything or win a championship?
I'm talking more so this year, that they're just never going to get a point. They're just never going to have a good race. They're never going to do anything that makes us go, oh, wow, they had a great weekend.
Okay. Yeah, so then I definitely disagree with that, because look at what happened this weekend. All right, they were both in Q2, at least, I believe. I believe Zhou got to Q2.
No, not for the main qualifying. For the sprint, yes.
Yeah, for the sprint, okay.
Yeah.
So they had some flashes this weekend of success. Obviously, Bottas was in a position to potentially get points and then got let down by potentially a gearbox. So I think realistically, it doesn't look that way based on Albon's performance, but I think Sauber has the potential to finish higher than Williams. Because we saw them at the back, pinned to the back early on, but they have been making incremental steps, and I think the fact that they slowed down their pit stops to be able to get on top of them is a good indication that whoever is calling the shots behind the scenes, right? Because it's what's his name?
I have no idea.
The guy that Andreas Stella replaced him at McLaren. Andreas Seidel.
Oh, okay,
Andreas Seidel is the CEO for Sauber and Audi. And they've got, what the hell's his name, Aluni Bravi as the team principal. Whichever one of them is actually making the calls seems to be making reasonable calls. They're not bowing to their partnership with Kick and that idiot that founded Kick and whatnot. I'm not sure if you followed that.
Not at all, actually. You want to get into it?
I don't want to get into it, and I don't know enough, but apparently, he's one of these tech bro types and thought that he was just going to buy into the Sauber team and be able to run it, and that doesn't seem to be anything because of the agreement they have with Audi.
Salt of the earth type of guy is what you're sounding like. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. No, that was a joke. That was sarcasm. Yeah.
Salting the earth to kill it all, but
That's exactly right. Yeah. Continue.
So, all that to say, I think decisions are being made well at the Sauber team, and we've seen progression. They have appeared to be getting better. Obviously, they haven't improved drastically, but I think we've seen more of an improvement from them than we have Williams.
That's a good point. That's a fair point. But just because Williams is very inept doesn't mean, like, they could both have 0 points.
Oh, absolutely.
At the end of the year is what I'm getting at. And I'm just saying, like, if there was ever a time to score points or to have a decent result, it was this weekend, and something fucked them again. So, like, and I don't think Zhou's good enough to step up in this instance. There's no proof that Bottas is even good enough. So, I don't know.
Yeah,
At least right now, I should say Bottas. Bottas in the past, yes, would have, but Bottas right now.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think this weekend threw a lot of teams for a loop.
It's fair.
So we may just take it as what it is, as a one-off, and maybe they haven't gotten better. But I think realistically, I'm not as pessimistic on them as you are.
Well, I picked them to finish last,
Yeah, I know.
and so I have to be.
And I also have to say with that, I was kind of impressed at what Alpine did this weekend, because they didn't look terrible.
They look like they're slowly trending in the right direction, and that's a point I forgot to bring up with Hulkenberg, is that if Alpine finally figures it out, if Albon starts having good races again, the only reason Hulkenberg's getting 10th is because, like we said, 8 of those drivers or 7 of those drivers are useless. So he's starting from like 13th every race because of ineptitude behind him. Mm-hmm. If some of that ineptitude gets in front of him, which did last year, he's fucked. And yeah, and it's probably a matter of time before Alpine at least starts getting some points.
Yeah. Just on that, one thing I'll say about Alpine is they brought an upgraded chassis for Ocon, I believe, not for Gasly.
Interesting.
The interesting part for me is that they genuinely had some pace. It wasn't great, but they weren't last, right? So they were there. They were able to compete with some of the field. That new chassis they brought Ocon was the exact same weight as the old one. So they were able to go faster without taking weight off, which there's 2 things with that. One, shows that they've made improvements in how the car handles. So Ocon at least seems to be more comfortable in that new car from a handling perspective. Still probably slower than it needs to be. 2, if you built a whole new chassis and didn't take weight out of it, tells me that that is already as light as that geometry can be. Right? Carbon fiber is not heavy material, and you don't put more material in than you need. So there's something they've done that is not allowing them to take weight out of the main portion of the car.
So, like we've deduced before, so then this might be it, is what I'm trying to get at, because what we deduced before is they don't have any more power left in that Renault.
Well, I wouldn't say this is it. Even if they're going to be able to take weight out of it at some point, they're going to find something. It probably won't be as much as they want, but if they can make the car more comfortable for the drivers, easier to handle through the corners, they don't need to make it go faster. Because if they can get faster cornering speeds, like we've talked about before, their deficit on the straight becomes less of a problem because they start the straight before. further in front of the people behind them, if you understand what I mean.
I do, yeah.
Right?
They have better exits, yeah. If they can just get to last year's car, and they can start getting regular 9s and 10s, I think that's a win for them.
Mm-hmm.
But how far are they away from that is the real question, which we're gonna have to find out in the next in a couple weeks. Yeah.
Based on this weekend, with a couple more DNFs, they would have been there.
Yeah, but you can't expect that every week.
No, you can't. Miami, historically, no, not a whole lot of DNFs.
No. Then it's Imola, which it might be their best chance, especially if it rains.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then we're into Monaco, which they did well last year.
It's true. But they're also...
But again, we talked about that. That was changeable conditions, rain-affected race.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm done with Alpine, like I said, after last week. So I'm not predicting anything with them anymore. I'm not saying anything about them anymore. I'm just gonna let this roller coaster ride.
Just let it ride. I suggest you do the same with Sauber, because I think if you stop worrying about them so much, you might be surprised at what they come up with.
I'm not worried at all. I'm actually... It's just sort of me saying, like, I told you so to everybody who thought Haas would be back at the back of the grid. I said, it definitely looks like Sauber is more primed to be a shittier team this year.
Well, there's still plenty of time for K-Mag to do his thing.
Oh, yeah. 100% he gets re-signed first. You want to place a bet on that? Actually, no. Steiner's not here to help him this time. If Steiner was here, 100% he'd be re-signed first with the exact same results.
The thing is that you're probably not wrong.
Yeah. Steiner was his protector. Now I think Komatsu is closer to Grosjean. And there was animosity between Grosjean and K-Mag, so...
Mm-hmm. Which reminds me, have you heard the rumor that Steiner was trying to buy into a team?
Oh my God, please go away. Which team? Oh my...
V-Carb. That is... It's a rumor. That's all I can say about it.
But as if they're having a bad enough season, you know? Like, that they have to have this behind them. Anyways.
Yeah, so apparently the rumor was that Steiner was trying to buy in for a significant portion of the team. So not necessarily to buy the team outright, but to be, let's say, a lead partner. And the stipulations for it were significant. Honda powertrains, a Red Bull junior driver in the seat, and something else. I can't remember what it was, but yeah. So basically Red Bull essentially was trying to sell the team without having to give up the team.
So, those are Red Bull stipulations.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, I thought you said those were. I thought you meant those were Steiner stipulations.
No. So that again, this is a rumor. I haven't seen anything to even remotely quantify this. But allegedly the price was astronomical for not owning the team outright, having to run Honda engines, having to run Red Bull young drivers for at least one of the seats, and one other condition. So apparently that's why it fell through.
Well, what you and I have talked about before is he starts the rumors.
Yeah, probably.
So this might have been just him.
Mm-hmm.
Just do your fucking TV show and get the fuck out of F1. You said it yourself. You don't know the engineering. You clearly don't know how to win. All you do is destroy the promising career of drivers. Just get the fuck out. Like, if there's a Red Bull junior driver and you have to take care of him, like, are you going to do a good job? No, you're going to do a fucking terrible job. You're not Franz Toast.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So why the hell would anybody sign up for that shit?
Anyway,
Yeah.
not to get onto a rant about that, but I figured I'd throw that out there for you.
You almost did. You almost did. I got nothing else from this weekend. Like I said, I liked the race. It's fun to watch. I hope there's more races like that.
Mm-hmm.
Miami's not going to be that, but it is what it is. But yeah, you got anything else to add before we go?
Just one other thing that didn't fit into the discussion, but is worth noting. The grass caught fire twice.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
In areas where cars were not running over it. You can almost make it work if a car's run over there and the heat from the car has caught the grass on fire, because that's something that does happen. The areas where the grass caught fire both times are not places where cars go over. There's no reason to cut those corners on that side. No one went off. And when I first saw it, I was like, okay, maybe discarded rubber from the tire, which is very hot. They come out of the tire blankets at 120 degrees. Or I think it's lower now, it's 105. But 105 degrees Celsius is hot. And then if it's being thrown off the tire as it's going around the track, that's even hotter. That's probably closer to 150, which 150 is enough to catch dry grass on fire. But that's where it stops, because it wasn't dry grass.
I was going to say.
Apparently it rained all week in Shanghai prior to the race. So there was no dry grass.
It looked like something out of the Matrix, right? Like it looked like it was just like some random glitch. Or maybe your thought of Detroit being Satan's asshole is wrong and it's actually Shanghai.
Right, the exact area that they decided to build a racetrack.
Yeah. That was creepy.
It was definitely bizarre.
Yeah. And on that note,
we'll call it there, I think.
We'll call it there. Yeah, I got nothing else to comment on that. Like, it's just crazy. Like, this is odd.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any theories? Do you have an elaborate conspiracy theory as to what it could be?
The only thing I'll say is that we heard about it when it happened, and then nobody talked about it again.
They didn't want to put the Chinese Communist Party in a bad light. We didn't really talk about the propaganda with Zhou. I guess you were right. You expected more, but that whole him at Parc Fermé at the end of the race was...
I mean, you got to give it to them, right? And he is the first Chinese driver to ever compete in Formula One. It's a big thing for them, right? You got to give them something. It's not as big when we go to Silverstone or Nürburgring or Hockenheim or wherever, because there's, German drivers, Italian drivers, English drivers, they're all over the fucking place. Australian drivers. The first Chinese driver, the first time.
Yeah, I guess.
You got to give it to him.
Because I was going to say, like, they didn't even do that celebration for Yuki 2 weeks ago. And that probably warranted something like that, too.
No. Japan has a history of racing drivers and F1 drivers, and they've had some success in F1. So, I mean, Yuki's nothing special in that case.
Yeah, he's definitely not as good as Kobayashi. But I'm just saying, like, that was the first time points in 12 years, the Japanese driver, yeah. That's all I'm getting at, yeah.
But, I mean, there was big hype about him being there, right? So, yeah.
That's fair.
It seemed a little over the top, but, it's not unheard of, right?
For 14th. I'd be embarrassed if I was Zhou.
Sure. But, they plaster Lance Stroll all over Montreal every year, right?
I threw out that hat. I tried giving it to my dad. Remember that? So Sean and I at the 2018 Grand Prix, we got a Lance Stroll 18 hat. Crashed the first lap, obviously. I don't think that was his fault, though. I think that was Hartley's fault.
No, that was his fault. Yeah. That was his fault.
I tried, Lance. I really did. And my dad's like, oh, yeah, sure. And then he went to the Bahamas and just left the hat. I was like, oh, that hat's still in his office. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway. Good talk.
Yeah.
We'll be back next week. We'll have a surprise in order. And, Gatsby, good job today. You stayed quiet after that whole craziness.
Do you have anything else to say, Gatsby?
Trying to understand quantum physics without coffee is like juggling flaming marshmallows in a snowstorm. You're bound to end up with a s'more of confusion.
You fucking stupid dog.
And on that note...
I'm going to beat you off camera. Off microphone.
But still on camera.
Will be posted on Instagram. F1_philosophy at Instagram. F1 Philosophy at YouTube. Please watch our shorts. Please subscribe, like, and download our podcasts. Otherwise, Gatsby's going to be out of a job, licking himself for money in the streets of downtown Toronto. We don't want that, everybody. Good night.